Alright, let's take a look at some of the properties of trapezoids and kites. So first, a trapezoid is a quadrilateral, easy for me to say, with one pair of parallel opposite sides. Now notice this is different from a parallelogram. In a parallelogram, both pairs of opposite sides are parallel, but when we have a trapezoid, such as this one, flying in, only one pair of sides is parallel, and it's pretty obvious from looking at it that this side is going to be the sides, or these pairs of sides are going to be the ones that are parallel. So that's what makes this a trapezoid. Now we can talk about some of the names and features for this. There are names for two sides. The names for the sides, rather. The two sides that are parallel, we call those bases. So this would be a base, and this would be a base as well. Usually you'll see them distinguished as base 1 or base 2. It really doesn't matter. We call them both bases, and those are the ones that are parallel. The ones that are not parallel are called legs. So we have a leg there and another leg on the other side. So the bases are the parallel parts, and the legs are the ones that are not parallel. Now we can also talk about a particular type of trapezoid. So this is still going to be true for all of this, but now instead of having just a regular old trapezoid, let's talk about an isosceles trapezoid. And this is a trapezoid in which the legs are congruent. So we have maybe something that looks like this. It's a trapezoid, so we know these sides are parallel to each other. But since it's isosceles, that means that the legs will be congruent, so we can mark it this way. Now that also adds, just like triangles, a situation where the angles between the base and the leg are going to be congruent as well. So in an isosceles triangle, we can say that that is going to be congruent to that, and we call these base angles. So there's a base angle and there's a base angle, and those are going to be congruent. They will not be congruent to the ones up here, but these will be congruent to each other, so that will be a separate set, and they will be congruent up there as well. So again, a trapezoid is just a quadrilateral that has one pair of parallel opposite sides, and an isosceles trapezoid is a trapezoid where the legs are the same. Now let's talk about maybe our most important idea that we'll get into. Let's bring back our picture of this, and we need to talk about something called the mid-segment of this trapezoid. And the mid-segment is what happens if I took this leg and I bisected it and I found the midpoint. So let's say the midpoint was there, so this side is congruent to that side. And then I found the midpoint of this leg as well, which we'll say is about here, and so that would be congruent to that. If I take those 2 points and I connect them, say by drawing that line in between them, right there, that line is called the mid-segment. And the mid-segment of a trapezoid has this pretty interesting property. If we want to find the length of it, the length of the mid-segment is 1/2 times the sum of the bases. So if I add the length of that base plus the length of that base, multiply that by 1/2, that's the length of this, which kind of makes sense. We should know just by looking at it that the length of this will be between the length of the longer base and the shorter base. That would get us, this process right here will produce something that is in between there, so it seems logical that that's possible. So again, the mid-segment connects the midpoints of the legs, and to find its length, the length of the mid-segment is 1/2 the sum of the lengths of the bases. Now let's move to our last quadrilateral that we're going to specialize in. Woohoo! Something called a kite. And a kite is a quadrilateral that has 2 pairs of consecutive sides congruent, but no opposite sides congruent. And that's going to look something like this. So in this, you're going to have two consecutive sides. That means they're touching. So say this side and this side will be congruent. And this side and this side would be congruent as well. So two pairs of congruent consecutive sides. However, none of the opposite sides are congruent to each other. So if I look, these two are not congruent, and these two are not congruent. And this is called a kite. You'll notice it is shaped just like when you think of flying a kite. It is exactly that kind of kite. And the property that I want you to remember most about kites is this, is that if we draw the diagonals of a kite, the diagonals of a kite will always be perpendicular, no matter what. So we have a trapezoid, which is a quadrilateral with one set of parallel opposite sides. And then we have a kite, where we have two sets of consecutive sides congruent, but no opposite sides congruent.